so excited that everyone has joined us. Today is an exciting day. It's our first event of the year, and we are just pleased that we're able to have it. We were supposed to have an event back in March that we canceled because of the pandemic. So it felt only too fitting for us to make sure that we discussed how has the cloud been impacted by this post-pandemic world. So we're excited you decided to join us. And Chris Carter and myself as co-chairs, we're really looking forward to this conversation. We've got four really distinguished, amazing IT executives that I think you're going to not only enjoy learning from, but also enjoy the fun that we have today, because this is a virtual day. So what I would say is I do want to take one moment and just appreciate where we are in the world right now. I want to say that I know people are dealing with sickness and family members being sick, and even the worst case scenarios. So we want to make sure that we respect that our thoughts and prayers are with those families, as well as the folks that are out there fighting for equality in the country. We know that this is a tough time for all of us, so there's a lot of serious stuff going on, but today we're really going to try and make this fun, give everybody a chance just to sit back and relax. So grab your favorite beverage, water, whatever it might be, iced tea, and enjoy your time with us today. So, okay, what are we going to do? So we're going to have a fun event where Chris Carter is going to lead us in a moderation with our four panelists that you'll meet in just a minute. They are fantastic, and we're actually going to leverage polling technology as well. So in just a minute, we're going to put our first of 3 polls out there that we want to learn from you as to what you want to hear. So this will be interactive, so stay engaged because you get to tell us what you want to hear. Additionally, we've got Justin Morning and James Kwan taking in your questions. So we'll be peppering in some questions through the event as well. So we're excited to have that as part of this. But the one thing I would do, James, if you would put this on the sponsor slide, I'd want to thank our 2 annual sponsors and then give a shout out to Zscaler as well. So our annual sponsors this year are Able Solutions. Able Solutions is a company that supports businesses of all sizes. They've actually been a Microsoft Gold partner for over 20 years. They have expertise in Azure and Microsoft Office 365, Dynamics, Power Platform, just a tremendous amount of skill sets, and they help their customers be more productive and profitable and really help them become leaders in their space. So if you've ever had if you ever have a chance to work with them, I highly recommend it. I also want to thank Cumberland, who is our longest running sponsor that we've had here at Tag Cloud. And Cumberland is an amazing company as well here in Atlanta. They do things where they help their customers deal with the challenges that their businesses face today. They take those challenges and they turn them into success. There's a lot of things that their customers are trying to do to transform. So ultimately, they take those opportunities and produce this remarkable results through helping their customers transform the way they leverage technology. So thank you for them and for being our longest running sponsor. And lastly, Zscaler, quick shout out. We were supposed to have a security event in March, and unfortunately we had to cancel it because of the pandemic. So Zscaler was going to be our primary sponsor there. Just want to give them a shout out. We will have a security event later this year, so hopefully y'all will attend that, whether it's virtual or in person. So that said, I want to say thanks to them. Now what we're going to do is we're going to step into our first poll. Rebecca, if you would throw the poll up here, this is where you have a chance to give us some feedback. So really what we're looking for is, what do you most want to hear? How do we want to start this conversation? So as we introduce a couple of us here, we're going to leave this open for a few minutes, and you can go ahead and just put your responses to the poll. So that this should be fun. But what I would like to do now is to just introduce Chris Carter, who again, he and I are co-chairs on Tag Cloud. Chris is a tremendous guy, family guy, great husband, great father. Really cool things about Chris is he's been in technology for over 20 years. He actually graduated from Georgia Tech. He was a Marine, or as they say, once a Marine, always a Marine, right, Chris? And then lastly, little known fact about Chris Carter, if you don't know him, this is great. He was a drummer in an 80s band and actually opened up for groups like the Outfield and Men at Work. So really fun. I know Chris is going to lead us in a great moderation. Pretty impressive stuff. So Chris, I'm going to hand it to you and let you take the reins here for the next couple minutes.
Yeah, thanks, John. Those certainly were the days. So And by the way, welcome to the Venetian. As you can see, Vegas is wide open, right? So, very much thankful for John, his friendship, his leadership, as well as to all of our board members on the Ag Cloud Society. Without them, none of this would be possible. It's all volunteers, and we're all passionate about cloud and cloud-based technologies. So without further ado, I want to jump in and introduce the speakers today. And full disclosure, they're not only all acquaintances, but friends, have long history. And so I'll try not to roast them as we go through this conversation, but we have a good group of people here. I think you'll like the chemistry. So to start out with Mr. Andy Green, let's see. Andy is the VP of Global Infrastructure for PRGX. He was brought in to lead the cloud initiatives. I started having kids when I was in my 40s, and last Friday somebody asked me if I was taking my grandkids out for a ride. So I'm a little bit of a late bloomer here, but the one thing that makes me feel good is Andy graduated from Florida Atlantic U at 32 years old. He was actually an auto mechanic, as part of his career. So very impressive in terms of going from being able to fix cars to be able to fix manual, intense processes, duplicate data entry, and really help with those automation and cloud initiatives. So kudos to you, Andy. He's also been a keynote speaker for us as Tag Cloud before, as well as a member of our executive council. So, and also Charlie, his 4-year-old, we may see Charlie. He comes in so frequently that right now his coworkers really want to speak to him more than he does Andy and ask where Charlie is. If they don't see him, they want to make sure he's okay. So
that's correct.
Thanks, Andy, and welcome. We're glad to have you. Next, we want to go to Derek. Derek Lewis has been the Director of Information Systems at RaceTrac for a number of years, but he's been at RaceTrac for 18 years. I mean, that's like, I don't know how many cat lives in technology, but it's at least 6 or 7. And so that's remarkable. He's also a native like myself, Marietta, Georgia Southern. And he's also a veteran. So Derek, thank you for your service. And Derek and I have participated in a lot of events together. The one thing about Derek is he's always adding unique perspective and value, whether it's over lunch or whether it's over a lunch meeting and executive. So thank you, Derek. Welcome to have you. Brian Benn is the CIO for Atlanta Housing Authority. He's been there a total of 7 years and 2 stints. Brian is also a very active member of the community. He's involved in the TAG Southeastern Software Association that I was involved with for a number of years. And interestingly enough, the AHA won the SSA Impact Award for 2 years before Brian joined the board there. And now he's one of the board members for that organization, very worthy as well. Interesting about Brian is, number one, he's got great taste in food because Mango's Jamaican next to the office there is fantastic. A little bit of spice and kick, but it's very good. And the second is he's kind of lived part of my dream from aerospace engineering at Tech. I wanted to be an astronaut at NASA. Brian was actually a software engineer for NASA for 5 years. So pretty impressive. He's also a classically trained pianist and violinist, or is it pianist? I don't know, Brian. You tell me, tomato, tomato. So anyway, glad to have Brian, and very, very nice guy. And by the way, Brian and I we've known each other for years. And, of course, we've been out to a lot of events and out at, in and out of social settings. I looked down, I said, Brian and I know a lot of people, 468 mutual connections. I think that might be a record, Brian. So there you go. I finally met someone that is as hard effort at networking as I am. Lastly, but not least, Dale Tuck. So Dale has actually been on the Queen's Colony Tour. I guess you would say that, right, Dale? Because he's born in England. He moved to South Africa, met his wife in Zimbabwe, had 2 kids, moved to Melbourne, Australia, then went to Disney. And fortunately for us, he never left. Came to Atlanta about 7 years ago. He's been in town since then. He's really been helping businesses with artificial intelligence. Dale, I'm sure many of you have seen him. Amazing. He's been on stage talking about AI, ML, blockchain, lots of areas of innovation. He was also working with the GDOT to enhance Atlanta their smart vehicle technology footprint. So he ran a hackathon, and it was really impressive. It was around improving the safety, the traffic, the autonomous vehicle support by running that hackathon. It was all a volunteer effort. So Dale formerly ran a $5 billion, he ran technology for a $5 billion global services company. He now leads IT for a multi-billion-dollar Fortune 1000 financial services company. He's not only a colleague, but he's a close friend. And that wife you met, Charlene, is I'm also a big fan of. A fun fact about Dale, we've actually been in a number of golf tournaments as well as events. Our secret sauce recipe is we always leave that fourth spot open so we can pull Dale's son in because he's the ringer in the golf tournaments. So there you go. There's our secret. So welcome to all the speakers. Fantastic group. We're excited to dive in. And then from that, John, we'll kind of turn it over. Do we have some results from the poll yet?
Looks like we're heavy on transformation, 48%, with the second place for security. So yeah, I'd say that's a pretty strong suggestion. Talk a little bit about transformation.
Okay, awesome. So, my kids like those Netflix where you kind of, determine the story. So this is kind of one of those events. The audience is determining the flow. So we've got several topics. We'll start with business transformation. So I'm going to kind of start with a question, Derek, just kind of pointed for you. Many companies have physical and work requirements. Some of it includes paper, printing, right? Logistics within the office. How are you guys dealing with this, and how's that going? And then also, as a follow-up, where are you guys on that digital cloud transformation journey, and how's the pandemic impacted that?
So nice little softball. I appreciate it. Thank you. It's like a 4-part question, but okay. All right. I will tell you that obviously with the pandemic and the coronavirus and everybody having to work from home suddenly, obviously we were not 100% ready to do it, but I will tell you we scaled very quickly because we already had a IT kind of work from home when you want to, 1 day a week or something. So the infrastructure was in place. So working from home seemed like a very logical, hey, just do it for, 800 people. Let's go test it and make sure it all works. What we did not validate quickly was, hey, all the other stuff that you do that you don't do on VMs and those types of things. So printing is a good example of, unfortunately, I'm kind of sad to say my accounting group and a couple other groups, if you walk by their desk, there's a stack of paper sitting on their desk that they printed out this morning, and that's their workflow process. Get through this stack, I know I've done my job today. And so all of a sudden they don't have a stack. And so how you manage that? And so we've worked with them on building some efficiencies of, hey, work your workflow through the system that's there. Because what's amazing is a lot of time it was always there, but people like using what they've always done. Telling them not to print paper was a tough conversation when they had an option. You take the option away, all of a sudden they found better ways to work, and I would dare to say even more efficient. Definitely more traceable. I can't tell you how many times I walked upstairs and see somebody looking for a sheet of paper that fell off a desk somewhere. That's my work phone. I didn't even know where that sheet is. So secondly, the other follow-up on your question, I think you said is, how are we dealing with all that stuff in our cloud infrastructure? I think for us, we are, I feel almost embarrassed to be on this panel. I was telling Chris or John when they asked me to be on this, I was like, whoa, we're like babies in this whole cloud thing. We're dipping our toe in the water kind of concept. We have not made a decision to say cloud first or anything like that, but we recognize the future. We recognize that there's no such thing as buying on-premise anymore and getting the features that you need. And so we're moving in that direction. Hopefully, or luckily, I guess, with this event that it's taken, it's forced a lot of conversations that probably were on the back burner for executives in the past. Now we can kind of have them right now. We're like, hey, I really need to move all this data that you want to do reporting on off premise. I'd like to put that so you can access it from home very easily and scale to your needs. So hopefully that does my 2-part question justice, but I'll jump in on you guys' question.
Eric, I think it's your background that does your whole answer. I just wanted to comment on that because I think you hit on a couple of things that are kind of relevant for kind of my experience. And that is, it did. I saw this comic the other day and it was kind of like a boardroom with a whole of executives going, we can't really get this transformation going. It's going to have to wait a little while. And then you saw this wrecking ball coming towards them with the word COVID on it. And that's what's happened for us. We've had, we look after millions of families, from a financial services perspective. And as part of that, we have a lot of paper that runs around our building. And we'd built some processes to digitize, some streams of that paper coming in. With COVID and kind of the demands on being able to work more remotely, it was amazing how fast we accelerated some parts of our transformation to respond to not having people on site. And that's brought a whole new layer of visibility to what we do as a business. So I think in terms of transformation, COVID, it's accelerated what businesses have been wanting to do and meaning to do, but maybe didn't have the focus and the momentum. COVID, sadly has created that momentum to move things forward. So I think there's a lot of synergies between what you just said and what we're seeing.
That's a great point. And kind of as a follow-up to that, you mentioned paper, and one of the themes that we hear a lot is, we really are looking at how can we look at cost takeout? How can we look at automation? We've got people there. We want to do everything we can to keep our workforce. We also want to make sure that they're being as effective and productive as possible, and that they're not working on manually intensive jobs because they don't have those stacks of paper, right? So how are we going to make sure they're doing that? So when you kind of think about leveraging cognitive services, RPA, artificial intelligence and machine learning, and yes, they're all buzzwords, right? And everybody's talking about them, but the bottom line is that this really does bring into picture those single points of failure, those examples of manual data, duplicate data entry, right? The old classic office space example. Well, I just hand this piece of paper to there. That's just my job, right? And
I did my part, right?
Yeah. So how are you guys, and I'll just open it up to the floor, how are you guys seeing those, because certainly those processes are becoming more under the microscope, right? In terms of, and how are you guys leveraging that transformation into identifying areas of opportunity for automation?
Hey, Chris, I think I want to piggyback off something you said right quick, and I'll yield to these other guys. I'm sure they got way more intelligent stuff to say than I do, but I'll tell you, we've been looking at RPA and AI and ML for a long time. The problem was the entry cost, right? And so you go, hey, I can go try this RPA to see if it works, but back in the day, let's say a couple of years, it was a $60,000 entry to kind of get going. It's like, not really sure it's going to solve all our problems. So what I think transformation, what we're at today, has, to Dale's point, it's kind of forced that initial entry cost off the table. So now it's like, hey, let's get to the real ROI part. And I think that's really beneficial.
Excellent. So, Andy, I know you guys kind of are, have, whether you think about the traditional footprint, right? So even though it's not in terms of a business process around manual, but, going in, looking at the traditional switching out the tapes and data, backup, right? Those things can certainly be very manual. So as you kind of look at the manual processes as it could relate to infrastructure support, right? Not just business process. How have you guys been kind of focused on that and making those change management?
Well, before COVID hit, we had some initiatives to move some of the on-prem infrastructure to the cloud anyway, right? We either by foresight or luck or just pure good planning on our part, we made the decision to move from on-prem PBX to cloud PBX. And, thankfully we did that. Otherwise, 1,500 of our 1,700 employees would be in a position where we couldn't make those outbound business calls. We couldn't receive inbound calls. And as, as we kind of look at what everything we do on a daily basis, we are heavily reliant on tapes from a backup perspective. Now, we had made the transition to archive data to the cloud earlier in the year and have been very successful with that. But when COVID hit, now we have people that absolutely have to go to the office, right? Because I can't restore data from tape if the tape's not loaded in the tape library, right? So, when we're talking about transformation and the safety of our employees, well, now we have to look at it as, how do we keep those people safe? Because every time they go to the office, there's they're opening themselves up for potential exposure, and that's not good for them. It's certainly not good for us from a business perspective. And, we want to make sure that our employees are healthy and safe. So, this thing has sort of spawned out a whole new area of thinking, and even as far as the data that we receive from our clients, because many of our larger clients would send us massive tape exports on a monthly, or in some cases a weekly basis. And somebody has to be there to handle the reception and the loading of that data from tape. So, as this has evolved, many of those clients have moved to a now automated FTP process for the same reasons that we're looking to move to, to get away from the manual processes around handling and loading tapes.
Yeah.
And because when we were talking about this earlier, when we were preparing, it's actually kind of funny. There's an analogy for that, and I think every business faces it. And it's something so simple as opening envelopes. Well, yeah, who opened envelopes when nobody's allowed to go into the office? So actually, one of our more enterprising VPs is looking at a facility. It's a machine. Talk about robotics. That receipts, opens the envelope, removes the contents, destaples, and puts it into a scanner. So you can digitize remotely, but it's as simple as opening an envelope. COVID's caused some consternation.
Yeah.
Andy, you mentioned data, and that brings up another point. So Brian, kind of when you think about, security, right? How has the custodial control impacted your journey? And how has that impacted, and what have you guys done since the pandemic started?
Well, I mean, when you talk about cloud data is all we're talking about. To me, that's what it means, and it means when we talk, because your data is now in the cloud, and security is important. Several things come to mind when you're talking about the security. You're talking about the custody of your data, the use of secondary devices, your exfiltration of your data, and even diminished, if you're in a private industry, diminished customer trust if there's an issue, like for instance what Equifax had. So to combat that, we've done a few things where one thing we want to do is we want to hold that third-party provider accountable, and that's in the beginning. When we talk about those agreements, we want them to be able to tell us how is that data stored, how is it accessed, how is it stored when it's addressed. And so we have to have all those things presented up front before we go into this agreement with that third party, so we can be sure. And then we also talk about secondary devices, because now there's access. You don't necessarily have the control anymore if somebody's using it on a laptop or a tablet or a smartphone. And so these are all the things that, beyond holding the third-party provider accountable, we also make sure that we have a comprehensive approach in terms of an IT GRC department. So we want to be more strategic than just tactical. Tactical, you're thinking about your networking protocols and handling your firewalls and things like that. But when you want to be proactive and you want to be more strategic, you start holding them accountable. You start setting up a practice that puts policies in place so we can enforce those to ensure that we're being careful. And the pandemic has introduced a new, I guess the old adage is never let a crisis go to waste. And we have to understand that the bad actors are thinking the same way. So we have to understand that regarding security, this is an ongoing effort, and that's where we have to be proactive.
Yeah, you get those 99.59s, and you start to put in all the other variables, right? With the cloud and the whole internet and the database and the APIs.
Right.
Then you're down to like 99. You're like, wait, hold on. We're not getting the SLAs that we were promised. What's going on here, right?
Exactly.
So good stuff. Good stuff. Well, I think this is a good point to kind of open up our second poll question, John.
Yeah, absolutely. Rebecca, would you go ahead and put that up? So I do want to just frame this for everyone. Think about this from a personal sense, right? So what's impacted you personally the most during the pandemic? And then from there, we'll take that and relate it to how technology could impact that, and then ask the team here what they've been seeing, and really if their organizations have done any specific studies around that. And then also, as we do this, I really want to invite, we've got, I think, a question in the Q&A. Feel free to ask questions. We are going to respond to those. So we're looking forward to making sure that you have your voice as part of this. So, so Chris, if you want, I can ask one of the questions that's in the Q&A now, or we could, keep with the line of talking we've been doing.
Well, go ahead.
Yeah, let me do that. So, so the first question that I saw in there I thought was kind of appropriate was, and it actually relates to what we're talking about in the polling question is, do you have a sense for how much productivity loss you're seeing employees not being able to be like fully engaged or productive due to things like lack of childcare or personal issues because of the pandemic? So I think the question, this is from Bob Dow. His question is, do you have tools to track this about productivity, or what are you seeing? Is that something your organizations have addressed? And I'll pose that to the whole group.
So I'll take first stab at that if nobody minds.
No, go ahead, Andy.
So from our perspective, right, it's easy to tell how the business is doing because we write claims, right? So as long as the claims and the revenue that we're booking is in line pre-COVID, post-COVID, we feel that we've got a pretty good handle on things. We've also been pretty unique in that most of the work done, with the exception of those folks that have to receive faxes and do the tape loads and that kind of thing, we were prepared for being remote. We didn't really do it, but we knew we could, because there's not a lot of manual interaction, right? Almost all of the data is delivered to the audit teams in an electronic format, and they use tools to do that. So they, from that perspective, our productivity is actually increased, and we believe part of that is because, frankly, people are working their own hours, right? They're able to start in the morning. The kids get up. They need to do their classroom, or they need to do spend a little family time. They can spend some family time mid-morning, mid-afternoon, come back to work after the kids go to bed, whatever the case may be. So we've sort of inadvertently added a lot of flexibility into people's schedule. And, I think that the dividends are paying off for us. We've been extremely successful as an organization and a business during COVID.
Isn't it amazing when you look to more of a results-oriented framework than a set regiment of working hours? We've seen this in Europe, right, with the 4-day work week. Similar results, right? We expect results, and I think most people feel blessed just to be, working, because a lot of our colleagues sadly aren't. So amen to that. I think that's a great response, Andy. One kind of follow-up question to that. When we think about intimacy and engagement with employees, right? It's kind of scary when we think it's one employee to many in the organization, right? Because it's really hard to create that engagement. I'm seeing a lot of these 5-10 user teams, whether it's within finance and operations or supply chain and compliance. And there's these groups that are really engaging in these smaller teams, and they're using collaboration, they're using frameworks, they're using technology to stay connected, but they're doing it in these smaller, sort of almost tribal, but still being able to kind of be connected to the larger organization. Just kind of curious, when you look at within your organizations, what kind of areas are you seeing about how your companies are staying engaged and also being respectful and intimate in terms of all these different factors that Andy was talking about?
So Chris, I'll take a stab at that one, and I also wanted to comment on I think it was Bob's question. I think overall, back to the initial point of this, is COVID's had an impact on everybody responding to things more quickly. So we've been rolling out kind of unified collaboration tools, and we've seen the adoption of that drive up significantly now. Things like Teams within Microsoft, Zoom. I mean, how crazy is the volumes that are going through Zoom right now? So I think we're trying to standardize on not letting everybody choose their own collaboration tools, but really rallying around the enterprise collaboration tools that we have, and people are learning the strengths. But back to Bob's question, initially we did have I won't say we didn't get our work done, because the same as Andy, there's reports that monitor operational effectiveness of most organizations. But I think it was harder for people to do their jobs initially. And then they learned, okay, this is how I do my job when I'm doing it remotely. I get a fob, I get a VPN access. So it just showed how resilient and adaptive people are when these things hit. But again, to acceleration, what it did accelerate for us is we're putting in Pegasystems, and Pegasystems is going to be our robotics, RPA, digital process automation platform. So we've been doing some pilots with robotics. And of course, one of the things that you do when you do robotics is you look at how many times are people double clicking? How many times are people clicking between applications? How many times are they copy and pasting? How many systems are they logging into? And there are tools for that. One of them is called workforce intelligence. So guess what COVID did? Because nobody's working remotely, it's like, this is a great opportunity for us to say, how do we make our workforce even more efficient? So we're probably going to make more investment in those workforce intelligent tools to monitor productivity, and actually more so to see if we can drive up more productivity from our people that are working remotely.
Nah, good stuff, Dale.
Chris, sorry.
Yep.
Chris, I know you're probably tired of me interrupting, but I really want to say something about what Bob said too, which is, when I say I'm sorry about interrupting, I really don't mean that. I think
I know you well enough, Derek.
My mom always said, if you say sorry, you can keep doing it. But I'm gonna take maybe a different approach. In our groups, I mean, a lot of you guys probably have the same thing. So we got, tech support, you got your operational stuff. That's very easy to measure from a metrics point of view. My group of developers, I'm just being honest, I'm gonna say they kept the lights on really well. I don't think they were being innovative. I don't think we did a lot of new stuff. It took a couple of months for us to start saying, okay, yeah, we're probably not going back in the office anytime soon. So we now have to really collaborate and work together to start working on the future. And I don't know what was the trigger. I cannot tell you that. I can just tell you, I wish I understood it, because I think they worked really hard. If there was an outage or, hey, this has to be done today, no matter what, everybody circled the wagons. They did all of that. But the moment I said, okay, we want to get a product to roll out in January of next year, we need to start talking about it, I don't think we had a lot of good performance there at all. So it's more of not an answer for Bob, more of yeah, I saw some problems in that area, to be honest with you.
Yeah, well, we can also identify areas of improvement along that journey, right? Yeah. John, do we have some results from the second poll yet?
Let's take a look. So, wow, 51% isolation. I think that's probably a true comment for all of us, right? We felt so disconnected from our team members and our company. So I'd say that, that's the leader. Second would be culture. So I would say we maybe want to just focus for a second, and I'll throw a question out for the team. Is there anything that you've seen in your organizations, whether it's an HR-based conversation or technology-based, anything that you've done to help your internal customers or your employees with the feeling of being isolated? Is there anything that any of the organizations have done or anything that you can think of that has impacted your company or organization?
John, I don't know.
I'll take that. I mean, well, one thing we've done is we've tried to be intentional as leaders, meaning listening and being sensitive to what our employees are dealing with, and we just can't take it for granted. I mean, it's the lines between work and home are now blurred. I think I heard somebody make a joke saying that they were going to sleep on the couch to cut down their commute. So of course there's isolation that we're missing. Sometimes you just miss walking outside your office door and sharing a joke, those water cooler conversations. But to combat that, we've been intentional. We've listened. We've checked in, if you want to call them wellness checks. We've been real flexible in terms of the schedule. Now, it doesn't necessarily do anything about the isolation, but it does mean that we're reaching out and trying to see what we can do regarding the overall wellness. We've also had some things where our groups have gotten together and had a movie night or planned a movie night via virtually. Now, when it first happened, everybody was gung-ho about the virtual cocktails, the virtual movie night, and everybody got a little fatigued about 60 days in. But we do have to check. We've worked with HR to just make sure that the employee assistance programs are working and are active, and just listening, and then being flexible with the schedule by saying, hey, if you need to do this, you need to get away, because some of our employees have turned into teachers, kindergarten teachers, high school teachers, junior high teachers. So we've been flexible in saying, hey, just be available, do your work, and over communicate. And if you've got to step out between 2 and 4, then hey, step out, take a break, do whatever you need to do. So
Yeah,
just to back that one up, we've actually because this is such a personal thing to our employees, we've actually set up 4 different focus groups that are geared around. I feel like I'm involved in the decisions that are made within the company. I feel like my work is connected to the goals of the company. And we're actually just wrapping up that process right now, which has been very insightful. And it comes back to the same things. Sometimes they don't feel like they were on the right call when a decision was made, or they might not have been, communicated with. And I think it comes back to something you said, and I was going to mention it a little bit earlier, is how many times have insights been gained when you've walked past the water cooler, or somebody's popped into your office for just 2 minutes, and you've had a quick conversation. And that doesn't exist in the same frame as it does now, unless you get a text message and those type of things. But those focus groups were run by our employees, and it was done really without management in the room, so they could speak very, very freely. So kind of excited to see what comes back from that and how we're going to adjust our approach.
Yeah, if I could interject just a little bit to that as well. The collaboration we were talking about earlier, I recently hired a new director as part of my team. Did it virtually, right? Did interviews over shared communication mechanisms, and hired him, and have introduced him to the team via Teams meetings or WebEx meetings or whatever collaboration tools we were using. And so I've got my 2-week check-in with the guy earlier today, in fact, and he says, this is really, really challenging. And I said, I completely understand, right? And it's more about being new to our organization. He can't read the people the way somebody who's been there for 3, 5, 15, 20 years. You have this relationship with folks, and you can kind of pick up on whether they're kidding or not just by body language, but inflection and that kind of reference. But I'm thinking, how do we solve this problem? We've got the ability to use images, right? We can stream video to collaborate. And because we're in IT, nobody wants to do that, right? We're perfectly happy to keep the cameras off and to just do what we do, and I hope that we're appreciated. And if you don't understand that I was kidding and you can't read read my body language, well, we've been doing this a long time and we just kind of carry on. But thinking about how do we bring new people into this atmosphere, it's difficult. So, we're trying to figure out ways to sort of get those guys more involved, and girls more involved in, using their cameras and being more face-to-face virtually, so we can get that body language and read what people take for granted when you can step out of your office and go talk to somebody.
Well, and I appreciate that's a great segue, because you talked about kidding, and the last thing we ever want to do, Andy, is kid, because we want to be very serious.
Oh, right.
We don't want to have anything. So let's do a few rapid fire questions. These are very serious questions. I want some deep introspective thoughts, but I want a quick feedback. So real quick, rapid fire. We're just going to go around the horn. What is the most embarrassing fashion trend you ever sported back in the day?
Neon clothes.
What did you say?
Bermuda shorts.
Yeah, neon. That day color. Neon. I was in Africa, so it was a different thing altogether.
Yeah. It's a different fashion statement there. Got it.
It was parachute pants for me.
I love it. Parachute
Hey,
pants.
Andy, I was right there with you, buddy. I thought I was going to be a break dancer, though. I had my future all planned out.
Exactly. Obviously, that didn't go very well.
Well, you don't know. You don't know what I do on the weekend.
Well, yeah, exactly. I was talking about for me. I didn't really have an insight into you, Derek.
Chris, the funny thing is, like right now, we're probably all sitting here with formal shirts on above, but we're sitting in our pajamas at the bottom. So that's probably a fact.
Right.
It's Angus Young look, with a sport coat on the top and shorts at the bottom.
Exactly right.
So what about, do we have any mullets or any leather skinny ties? Anyone going to own up? Brian, what you got?
I did have a leather skinny tie, and I rocked it. Absolutely. Circa 82.
So I grew up in East Tennessee. I had a mullet too with my parachute pants.
Okay. Right. Okay. All right. I'm going to throw some outs out here. What's your favorite place at home to have a conference call outside of your office?
Ooh.
The back deck.
Man.
Yeah, back
balcony
deck.
a lot.
Back deck.
Okay. All right. COVID lean or COVID-15?
COVID-5.
COVID-5. I'm with you, Andy.
COVID lean.
Got about a 5 in there.
All right. You can tell everyone these are serious questions.
Yeah.
And then finally, you know, kind of in one sentence, where did you outperform or underperform in the pandemic, in your own opinion? I know that's hard, but we'll give it 2 sentences. We'll go around the horn. Anyone have any thoughts there?
I think for me, I can start off. I'll take the easy one. I think which I think RaceTrac is really good at, firefighting mode. I think our reactionary was stellar. Like anything that broke, we was all over it quickly. We was coming up with really quick solutions. Underperform, I think we just did that. I think we treaded water really well. I don't think we went to swimming yet. And so it took us a while to actually say, hey, this is the way of life. We can't take off a year and not be innovative. So I think that's where we underperformed. I think we're picking it up now.
Okay. And then finally, we have multiple musicians on here. So the final one is, what was the first concert you ever attended?
Cheap Trick and REO Speedwagon.
Wow. Johnny Clegg and Savuka.
Never heard of them.
I was in Africa, man. Yeah.
Sounds like they were great. They sound awesome. I can't even look that up on the internet. I don't even know how you.
Brian, what you got? What you got, Brian?
Shabba Ranks in New York City, 85, reggae artist.
Oh, right on. Okay. Derek?
I was Prince fan.
Wow.
Oh,
Yeah.
Can't believe my mom let me go see that as a teenager.
Yeah. Great first concert.
yeah. One thing I remember about seeing Prince, he never started on time, and he never played the song like it was on the record. It was just like one long, continuous song.
Right. It's a good call.
Good stuff. Hey, John, do we have another poll question to throw out?
Yeah, let's go to our third poll. If you could put it up there, Rebecca. And I'm going to ask a question along with this. But really, this is, again, it's a personal question. How have you seen your productivity impacted? And how does that affect the way you work? And I've heard a couple of folks talk about that already, about the flexibility and actually some improvement. And there's actually a question in the chat from John Slater. And he says, do you have concerns around maintaining productivity gains over the next 6 to 12 months? Do you see this as more of an opportunity to continue advancing your organization's transformation? Is that something you could see yourselves improving? Or are you making plans? I know as leaders, you're always leaning into the opportunity to change and improve. So that would be the question: is are you concerned about gaining those or keeping those advances, or are there plans to even improve by transformation?
So I'll give you a very quick answer from my perspective. I think, John, it's a very insightful question. We're going to accelerate. We will accelerate our transformation based on the things that we've learned during this crisis. I think the worry side of that is that we've got to get people back to work, and as Primerica is very socially active, we want to make sure that as many Americans as possible, that their futures are looked after in terms of investments and insurance, etc. But how do we not let this machine stall? So that's a very big concern for us, because you're going to be productive if you're doing business. And I know among this panel, a lot of our friends, have either lost their jobs or had their hours cut. And I spend a lot of personal time thinking about how can we use our relationships, like with GDOT and the community in Atlanta, to get this machine spinning up again. But it feels like, unless you're a biochemist and you can find a solution for COVID, it's going to be very difficult for us to do.
Hey, I'll throw in, this is probably being totally unfair, it's my point of view. I feel like at my level, I feel like I'm less productive. I'm gonna be honest with you. I think I spend way more time in Zoom meetings now than I met in the past, because the minimum Zoom meeting is 30 minutes, right? That's the minimum. There's no, I think someone alluded to this earlier. I think it might've been you, Dale, but I can't remember who said it. There's no 2-minute meeting. There's no such thing now. Everything's a minimum of 30 minutes or longer. And for whatever reason, if you book 30 minutes, you feel the need to talk all of that. And so I find myself in back-to-back meetings from 8 a.m. to 5 or 6 p.m. every day. And so then I go, okay, when do I do the actual other stuff that I need to get done? And so I think the answers are less productive and more hours. And I say both. I really do. I think both to that.
You know, it's interesting. It's, you know, what I define as Christmas in July is giving time back from all these calls, right?
Right.
Because we, like you said, we feel the need to fill up that half hour or hour, whether we need it or not. So I think that gift that keeps on giving is giving time back and making sure that every meeting is truly mutually valuable, right? Our value being coming from each side. I want to do a quick follow-up on the isolation because it's unique. We think about how people are connecting, right? And of course, video is one of the things. It doesn't help you with your steps, but it does help you from being, you know, ADD multitasking, right? On some of these calls, you got to pay attention more, you got to look, and it does create some level of engagement. When you guys kind of look at how the change management aspects of isolation and keeping people engaged, you know, we can get video conferencing fatigue. We can get, well, hey, we want to engage with you, but oh my gosh, you know, it's after hours. I don't want a virtual happy hour. I want to be with my family. I've been on back to back all day. I haven't even gotten out of my chair. I haven't had a bio break in 4 hours, right? How do you guys look at that balance? And then, you know, kind of continuing on with that thread with the organization to kind of maintain those levels of interaction that are meaningful, at the same time being respectful to the groups that you're asking their time and the connectivity that you're creating.
Well, I think one thing that I guess we have to realize here, point Chris, is that the things are fundamentally changed, and they're not going to go back to the same. So as leaders, we have to start changing from a strategy level, not necessarily the strategy. I mean, we just have to be more perceptive and more intentional in terms of how we're crafting that strategy. There has to be a clear delineation between our strategy and our tactics, so that, hey, because it's not only a pandemic, there could be a fundamental change in the industry. There could be a competitor that changes how the business is done in the industry, if you're in private industry. There could be a leadership change in the organization. So we have to be able to accommodate change. And so we do that by making sure we understand the difference in terms of our strategy that's anchored by the overarching strategy of the organization, and then those tactics. And if we're the best leaders, it's only the tactics that are going to change, and that we're going to be able to pivot but still accomplish that strategy. So it's just kind of, I mean, it's just kind of hard to determine where it's going to go. We just have to be prepared and create our strategies in a malleable fashion and be more accommodating. And then another big thing, a big point of this is with this change, we have to make sure that there's customer service. We have to be customer service focused, because we were definitely ready with those collaboration tools, whether it was Zoom, whether it was Microsoft Teams. What we were not necessarily ready with was for the entire enterprise to be all using it at the same time. So these are the things we have to be able to adapt to as leaders.
Yeah, great point, Brian.
Cool. Hey, Chris.
Yep.
Why don't we look at the results from the last poll?
Yeah, there we go.
I found this pretty interesting. The question, do you work more or less hours? 51% said they're working more hours. So I think Andy was mentioning it before, and I may have been Derek as well. We're seeing that people may be working different hours, but they're working more hours. Now, there are only 2 honest people in the group that say they work less hours. So, and then lastly, we are seeing about 30% of the people believe that they're more productive. So that's probably a lot to do with the adoption of new technologies and being able to do that. And I do have a question from Joseph on the Q&A, if I can ask that real quick, that relates to this. So, you know, for team members that are now remote, did you allow bring your own devices? And if so, was there any complexity around securing those endpoints, or just your philosophy around bring your own device and ultimately the security and maybe even availability of your remote workers? Anybody have a thought on that?
I can take that. For us, it wasn't a big issue. In fact, part of our go remote strategy was, again, we're in the recovery audit business. Many of our workers had never worked remote ever. Many of them didn't even get email on their telephones, right? So, or their smartphones. So in order for us to really enable all 1,700 people to go to work, in a lot of cases, we relied on people to use their own device. And simply because we are effectively a VDI organization, it didn't really matter as long as you met the security controls, you know, had AV and up to date on patches, you could log into your VDI and then you did your work remotely on that VDI instance, right? So that's probably 2/3 of our workforce. And then the rest of us, if you needed to, you know, use your personal device, you could do that if you registered it through Intune. So for us, it wasn't a big problem. And, you know, I would say partially because of our ability to enable people to use their own device, we were very successful in going remote.
I've got an interesting sort of, I guess, a little bit of a different question I want to throw out. Another audible here, but technology is not always the answer, right? Sometimes the answer is removing technology. So I'm just going to throw this out to the group. You know, when you kind of look at across the business where you look at opportunities for improvement, do any of you have examples where the answer is not adding technology, but it actually is removing technology?
Chris, so I don't know if I can think of an example right now, but I will tell you that I'm a huge proponent. In fact, if you looked at some of my LinkedIn articles, it's written around that as IT people, we generally like putting in IT systems, when in actual fact, we need to question, does that process, is it still relevant in the world we live in today, or the business environment that we're in right now? And I remember a story from a past life where we had this massive database that did tracking of logistics movements. And it was actually one of those things that somebody said, well, what does that do? And when we dug into it, it was being maintained, but it wasn't doing anything. It had been superseded by other systems, and the team that was still looking after it would just carry on doing the maintenance on it. So I think bringing that BA slant thing, so do we still need that process? Can that process be done at a lower cost with a shared service or a captive area? Could that process be done if we collapse it into a specific part of the organization where specialization will help us get efficiencies? Should we use some sort of technology to automate that process after we've optimized the process? And only then, kind of at the bottom of that filter, do you actually start doing things, which is, let's make a technology investment in getting it there. I've seen it multiple times throughout my career. Every time you watch a process, it starts to get a little bit better. So I think shining a light before you make a technology investment is probably one of the smartest things an IT leader can do. We have a motto. We want to rationalize, modernize, and secure our infrastructure, and everything's based really on those three things. I think Tarita Jackson asked an interesting question in the question here, which is about technology investments. And just wanted to respond to her, and I've only got a few minutes left, but actually it's quite the opposite. We get our business to describe the capability that they require, and we try as much as possible, Tarita, to remove any technology speak in that. So if they've seen a fancy presentation or they've seen a demo of software, that's irrelevant to me. What they have to describe is a business capability that they require, which might have been spawned by an idea that they had, and what business value, and not subjective value, objective value is going to be created. Revenue up, cost down, or risk down. Only then does it move across into our architecture function, and the architecture team, they try and leverage as much of the technology we already have within our shop before we go anywhere near making an external purpose. In fact, we have a whole decision tree, which is, are you building something on a platform to create competitive advantage? What we'll probably invest. If you're building something that doesn't really create competitive advantage and you're doing it in kind of like a one-off way, we're probably not going to make an investment in that. So actually a huge amount of work has gone on in that area and will continue to do so. So yeah.
Good stuff, Dale. You know, in the spirit of giving back, you know, I think we can kind of wrap up. I don't know. Does anyone have any closing thoughts? Or John, do we have any other questions that you feel like we need to answer?
I think there's maybe one I'd like to do from the QA, and I appreciate all the questions. And then maybe let everybody give a finishing thought, and then we can do a toast to the end. Okay, so I'd like to ask a question from this is someone who hasn't asked a question yet. His name is Yasser, and it says, how are you using data to predict demand and products? So I think this is the forward-looking question. Are you leveraging, and I know, Brian, you spoke about data and how important that is to your business, and I know that I think everybody has mentioned that on the call today, but are there any things that you're either using today or that you plan to use to help kind of predict the demand of your organization, or areas that you can support them better? Is there anything you're using that way?
We're definitely looking and moving towards making data-driven decisions and providing that, whether it's in form of a dashboard or what have you. That's where everything's going. But before we can even get there, and before we can even start talking predictive analytics or AI or any of those things, I think the important thing is that there's some type of strategy, whether it's a master data management strategy or whether it's an enterprise information management strategy. You have to reduce the disparate systems where you can, try to get to one single source of the truth, and just kind of corral the data before you can ensure the access and the accessibility and accuracy of that data. So I know we kind of short on time, but that's definitely where we want to head, whether it's Tableau, whether it's Power BI, all that's fine once you corral that data and then get it into a single source of truth so you can use it to make data-driven decisions, which I think will help any business, any organization.
Excellent. How about a quick around the horn, Chris? We'll have everybody any last thoughts.
I'll give one quickly. I wanted to try and squeeze this in anyway. We're in a very fortunate position. We're in an amazing part of the world. We're in an amazing city. We all have amazing jobs. I mean, IT, you just love getting beaten up every day by your CFO. I guess the request I'm making is let's try and figure out ways to share what we have with others. I mean, I've never tipped as much as I have since this has happened. You know, we're trying to be trying to support people, help people find jobs. In fact, Chris is helping one of my friends who lost her job, reconnect into industry. So let's share the greatness that we've got here in good old Atlanta and Georgia.
Yeah, paying it forward. You know, we're all blessed to be employed. I think we're blessed to be here, connected with one another. And so just want to finish out with a toast to our fantastic panelists, to friendship, and to our families, because that's truly important during these times. So here to all of you. Cheers. And those of you that are also attending, please joining us. We are delighted to have you join us and thankful. On behalf of TAD Cloud, John Fiscus and I are excited that you joined us today, for the speakers, for the entire TAD Cloud board, and be on the lookout because more events to follow. And you know, when we get back into that normal of getting back in person, we want to encourage all of you to come join us, because we had a lot of fun today, and that's our culture. That's what we always want to do. So thank you all for attending, and thank you to our speakers who added a lot of thought leadership. This was fantastic. Great job all.
Thanks everyone. Cheers everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you very much. Take care.